One of two British rowers rescued twice of WA isn't ruling out another attempt to row from Geraldton to Mauritius. The man and his partner were pulled from heavy seas 11 days ago and taken to safety by a ship.
There's no greater responsibility, I don't think, than looking after another human being in a very difficult environment. And that was quite a difficult thing to try and do. Rowing the Indian Ocean is different, a totally different gravy to rowing across the Atlantic. The Atlantic's quite simple, you'll get blown across. But the Indian Ocean is volatile, it's different, and you're going to get caught in bad weather. That's a given. And we did.
A painstaking climb to safety. In rough seas, James Ketchell and Ashley Wilson make it to the top of a 100,000-tonne oil tanker. Ashley had a head injury, immediately medically assessed. His first request, fruit juice.
Orange juice leke aao, orange juice. Orange juice or pani ka water.
Able to crack a smile now, hours earlier a 6-metre swell struck the rower's boat, rolling it.
That was one of the scariest situations I've been in because you're so far out, a helicopter can't come and get you, it doesn't have the range, so the only thing that can come and get you will be it was a commercial vessel. And when something of that size is coming straight at you to pick you up, and you know you've got to figure out how to get onto it, it's really scary. And we did it, and we were okay.
So James, after the ultimate triathlon, you then attempted to row the Indian Ocean and cross the Atlantic again, and then row around the coast of Britain. But all three ended up, for various reasons, with the missions having to be stopped.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll explain the story quickly of what happened, and we can talk about how I dealt with that. Because after these three failures, probably not the right word, but after these three incidents where I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve, kind of spiraled off into a very bad place, worst place I've ever been in my life. So we'll talk about that. But when I got back from cycling around the world, someone got in contact with me, an amazing guy called Ash, and asked if I wanted to row across the Indian Ocean with him. And initially I was like, I don't really know if I can do it, I'm quite busy. But he was just different. He was displaying the actions of someone that wanted something. He wasn't going out telling people what he was going to do. He was doing it. He was trying to raise funding. He built a website. And when I got back from cycling around the world, I guess I had quite a lot of public profile for a period of time. And then off the back of that, people were contacting me saying, I want to do what you do. I want to do what you do. How do you raise money? How do you do all this stuff? And I would tell people what to do, and I'd never hear back from them again. But Ash was totally different. He kept coming back to me, and I then realised that he had an amazing story. He had Hodgkin's lymphoma, a type of cancer. Nearly died, actually, when he was 19. It was his third round of chemo that saved him. And he had epilepsy ever since he was a kid. And you know when you get a gut feeling that just something feels right? It felt right to do this with Ash. And yeah, look, I mean, massively long story short, we boat capsized, he hit his head, and we got rescued in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Actually, that was one of the scariest situations I've been in because you're so far out, a helicopter can't come and get you, it doesn't have the range, so the only thing that can come and get you will be it was a commercial vessel. It was a huge crude oil tanker. It was 250 meters long and quite literally about 70 to 80 feet up onto the deck, because it wasn't loaded down with oil at the time, so it sits a lot higher in the water. And when something of that size is coming straight at you to pick you up, and you know you've got to figure out how to get onto it, it's really scary. And we did it, and we were okay. And actually, off the back of that, it was quite interesting, because that was global news that we've been rescued. And the main thing is Ash was okay in the end, and you know, there's no greater responsibility, I don't think, than looking after another human being in a very difficult environment. And that was quite a difficult thing to try and do. Rowing the Indian Ocean is different, a totally different gravy to rowing across the Atlantic. The Atlantic's quite simple, you'll get blown across. But the Indian Ocean is volatile, it's different, and you're going to get caught in bad weather. That's a given. And we did. But off the back of being rescued, we had like quite a lot of media. Initially, I was quite down and fed up off the back of that. But then an opportunity came my way. You know, people were ringing me up saying, "Hey, you're the guy that was on the news. We've seen you. What happened?" And then all of these opportunities opened up off the back of that for me to go and speak at conferences. People just wanted to hear the story of what it was like. So it was weird because that didn't go so well, but I ended up doing all right off the back of it, bizarrely. And then I ended up working on a project out in the Amazon jungle off the back of that. And then off the back of that, I ended up meeting Anthony, who wanted to cross the Atlantic. And as you know, we crossed the Atlantic. He didn't have that much time, so rowing takes quite a long time. So we designed this special hybrid boat, which you could pedal, which is a bit more efficient. And also you could utilize a kite. We didn't want to sail, we wanted to be different. So we designed this hybrid boat and we're halfway across. And Anthony's an older chap, an amazing guy, very successful businessman. So it's my job to manage the project and get him across safely. And I think to myself, you know, and by this point I had quite a lot of experience. I had one successful row under my belt and I had a failed one. So I knew what it was like for things to go wrong. And if something was to go wrong, I knew how to deal with it because I've been there. And I thought to myself, you know, lightning doesn't strike twice, does it? And I'll tell you it does. Yeah, we were halfway across and he had a problem with his heart, actually, with his irregular breathing. And we got on the phone to a doctor on the satellite phone. They said, "You've got to get him off the boat now. He potentially could be having a stroke." So I'm like, oh my goodness, how does this happen to me again? So we get him off the boat. He's fine. But again, we have to go through that whole process of being rescued and things. And it's very, very dangerous, very dangerous. But, you know, we're okay. And then I'm like, right, I need to work on something on my own. So yeah, I look at rowing around Great Britain. And can you believe it? I'm like a couple of weeks in and I become poorly myself and have to come off the boat. And all of a sudden, I think all of these incidences where things hadn't worked out just like got on top of me. And instantly I just lost all motivation for anything really. And that was probably, people ask me and they say, "Tell me the hardest thing you've ever had to do or you've overcome." It's got nothing to do with climbing Mount Everest or rowing the Atlantic. The hardest thing I've ever had to do was like really kind of pick myself up off the back of all these different things going wrong, where because your brain will play tricks on you, you think there's no way to recover from this. I've lost all my credibility, game over, everything I've worked on has now been undone and completely ruined. And if you're not careful, you'll spiral into a really bad place. I lost all motivation for, everything. I didn't want to talk about things anymore. People were asking me to speak at their events. I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want to do anything. And this went on for a long period of time. And I think my parents were like a little bit worried. But being honest, I hid it well. And it sort of got to a point where I thought, this can't carry on. If this carries on, well, it's not going to be good for me. And B, I owe it to the people that have helped me get to where I am to move on from this. And some of the things that really hit me were, there's a very famous saying, right? And that is, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I totally disagree with that, and I think it's nonsense. Because actually, those incidences of things going wrong almost crippled me. I found it very difficult to get over that. And you will all come across people where things have happened to them that are outside of their control. Something unfair has happened, something unjust has happened, something disappointing. And for whatever reason, they can't move on. And it destroys their life. They become bitter, they become depressed, and I just knew that couldn't happen. And I realized that actually no one's going to come and help me to a degree. I can tell my friends, I can tell people, I'm feeling fed up. But it was really all on me. And one day something just clicked. And I thought, I can't sustain this anymore. I wasn't working. I stopped going to the gym. I stopped exercising. And I just thought, well, this just isn't me. And I can't feel sorry for myself. And it kind of made me realize bad stuff will happen to you, to me, to everyone watching this. Bad stuff will happen. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You can't stop that. But what you can do is control the way you respond to it. And so I kind of like eventually I picked myself up. And I thought, well, I failed at rowing around Britain, but I committed to raising money for a charity. So I got on my bike and I rode around Britain, and it was the best thing I could ever do. And after that, 1 month later, it was 3,000 miles to ride around Britain. It's very hilly, by the way, the coastline of Britain. But I did it and I got round, and it was exactly what I needed. And the one thing I can say, if there is anyone going through a situation where they're in a major rut and they can't get out of it, it's having something to focus on. I think deciding that I was going to get up and go and ride my bike around Britain, now not everyone can do that, and you don't need to do that, but having something to focus on so your mind is not spiraling out of control all the time really helped me. And I talk a lot with kids about being accountable. Don't ever feel sorry for yourself. Don't ever think you're a victim. You're not. Bad stuff happens and you just have to deal with it. And so actually all of these things that happened, when I look back, were probably really good, actually, because I've never really had any bad stuff happen before. I had the bike accident, but it was good for me. It opened my mind up.
So what about fear of failure then?
I don't worry about that at all anymore, at all.
So these experiences that you went through, and you went through really dark times of not being able to process what happened, then you pick yourself up. So now you don't worry about failing, because what's the worst that can happen?
Failing is not a problem. And I don't look at it as failing. You're learning, right? You're learning. So these things that didn't go so well for me, I've learned loads of stuff. I do things I would do differently. I've learned a lot and I've grown. And sometimes it's all part of growing up. It's all part of life, having these different experiences. Some are going to be amazing and some are going to be terrible, but there'll always be something you can take from something that happens that you don't like, or you don't think is fair, or whatever it is. And that is good for you, because like if you want to pursue something and you want to put yourself out there and work hard and achieve things, it's not always going to be easy. A lot of stuff will go wrong, probably 50% of the time. And so
then ultimately you ended up
I'll tell you how it happened. Again, when I was cycling around Britain, I thought to myself, I'm going to learn how to fly. Again, it was something that I was interested in when I was younger. But again, I always thought when I was younger that flying was for people who had lots of money and were very intelligent, and I didn't have any of that. But now I was older, and I thought, well, I can learn how to fly. Why can't I? So I actually wanted to fly helicopters. That was my main interest, but it was just far too expensive. So that wasn't really an option because I couldn't afford to do it. And a lot of people were flying fixed wing, and I quite like being different. Like, it was really weird because when I was young, all I wanted to do was fit in. And now I have no interest in fitting in. I want to do my own thing. And so I decided, I went down to Popham, which is my local airfield, and I decided that I was going to have a go at flying gyrocopters. And the guy was really nice instructor. His name was Steve, and I'll never forget. And now, the one thing I do remember is this is why I now take kids flying. Because when I was young, a chap took me flying in his plane when I was 10 or 12. I never forgot that. And so I went back there and I got in this tiny little gyro thing. People look at them and say, I'm not going to get in that. That's like a flying toilet or whatever. It's been called lots of different things, right? They're very small little things. But as soon as he opened that throttle up and we took off, it was just something clicked and I thought, wow, this is amazing, amazing. And all of a sudden I became hyper-focused again and thought, I'm going to learn how to fly. And so I was really lucky. Where I used to race motorbikes and I had quite good balance and coordination, and where I'm probably more of a practical person than an academic person, it just came to me. I was really lucky. I think the minimum hours that you have to fly in order to take your test is about 42. Like you can't, doesn't matter how good you are, you can't take your test before that. And I think I passed on like 43 or 44 hours. It just came to me. I was lucky. And then I thought, it was just something that happened. And I thought, where am I going to go with this? And someone mentioned about jokes, I think, so why don't you try and fly one around the world? And I kind of looked into it, and there'd been some attempts and things, and I thought, I want to fly one of these around the world. And again, that's when I really found out you've got to be careful who you take advice from. Because a lot of people, says, you are mad. You will not be able to fly that around the world. Just because you've climbed Mount Everest and you've done some other stuff, that means nothing now. I was like, okay. So I kind of took that on the chin. But then I went out and I spoke to high-time pilots, people who'd been flying their whole career, who had thousands and thousands of hours. And they did also say, you're pretty nuts. But if you do this, this, and this, you might be able to do this. That gave me the hope and what I needed to hear. It all goes back to having the right people around you, right? And so this is where that got hard. I needed to buy an aircraft in order to fly around the world. And I'll never forget, I met someone who said, I love what you're doing. The plan was to fly around the world, speak in a school in every country in the same way that I did when I flew around the world. The guy bought into it and was like, yep, I will underwrite your aircraft. I'll pay for it. So I went over to Italy to a great family that built these particular aircraft. And I said, go ahead, start building it. And they built it all. And I'll never forget, the guy rung me up and was like, it's pretty much ready. You need to pay for it now. I'm like, yeah, no problem. And I try and get in contact with this guy and we just disappeared. I had nothing. And all of a sudden I felt really exposed. And there I had this aircraft sitting there, brand new one, that I had no money to pay for it. I was expecting this person to pay for it because they committed to doing that. And all of a sudden, I managed to get in contact with this guy, and he said, I can't do it anymore. And I was like, right, that's not good. And I was really frustrated. But again, if you've got nothing good and positive to say, just don't say it, right? Because sometimes you can say things that you can't take back. So I decided not to say anything. As you can imagine, I was pretty disappointed. So I had to ring up Luca, who runs the company, Magni, an Italian company, and explain what's happened. And you only really get to find out what someone's like when you tell them something they don't want to hear, right? So I had to ring him up and say, I can't buy your aircraft. And I was dreading making that call, dreading. And when I rung him up, within 2 minutes, he was like, don't worry about it. Everything's okay. We understand these things happen. We'll sell it to someone else. And I'm like, wow, thank you. I didn't expect that to go so well. And I kind of reflected on it, and I looked back and I thought, do you know something? That was all my fault. And I'll tell you why it was my fault. I didn't take ownership of it. If something is too good to be true, it probably is. And instead of just going, yeah, thanks. I didn't really know this guy from a hole in the ground. And to think that he was going to come through and do this, it was my fault. I didn't qualify the opportunity. I should probably got him to transfer some money up front or something. And it was just my inexperience. I made a mistake. And I thought to myself, do you know what? I'm kind of I'm at a defining moment, And that defining moment could be, I could walk away from this whole campaign now without losing my credibility. Yeah, someone said they were going to give me money and they didn't. Not my fault. But I didn't like that. That didn't sit well with me. So I thought, you know what? I'll take ownership of that. It was all my fault. I messed up. And so I went back to the drawing board and started trying to get the money together to buy the plane and fly around the world. And you know what? It was almost like what had happened was a test for me. all of a sudden, it all started to come good. DHL sponsored me and all these other companies. And I didn't make the same mistake again. I paid for the aircraft up front. So, you know, I learned something and I got to the start lines. And a lot of people don't realize that. And people saw me flying around the world thinking I was some massively backed guy with loads of money. I had all these big sponsors, and that wasn't the case. These companies don't just give money away. They only gave what I needed, and I was on a real tight budget getting around the world. And the journey to get to the start line and leave at Popham 3.5 years ago now was harder than flying around the world. I mean, we could talk about flying around the world all day, and you know, but one thing I can tell you from flying around the world, everything I worried about never happened. I was worried when I set off, thought I'd bitten off more than I can chew. Brain's gone overdrive. Thinking, what if this happens? What if that happens? None of it ever did. And if I'm really honest with you, flying around the world wasn't difficult. Just wasn't. It was amazing. Met loads of great people. Spoke in every country that I passed through. Did some crazy stuff. Flew very close to the Golden Gate Bridge. May have gone under it, although I can't remember it. Flew round the Statue of Liberty. Yeah, it was amazing. And, you know, it would be very easy to say, oh, there's no way I could do that. But it wasn't that bad. Yeah.
And then you ended up breaking records and entering the Guinness.
Yeah, I got a
Book of
Guinness World
Records.
Record when I got back. Yeah. I actually never did it for that reason. I did it because I wanted to do it. Yeah. And this is the thing, and I've seen it firsthand. There is so much opportunity on this planet. This whole planet, right, in my opinion, is oozing with opportunity. There's so many amazing things you could be doing out there. But no one is going to knock on your door and say, surprise, here's the best opportunity you've ever had, right? That will never happen. Never, ever, ever, ever.
So how do you make your opportunities?
By putting yourself out there. You take the first step, right? So you put yourself out there. You're not afraid of rejection. When someone rejects you, think, okay, no problem. I'll learn from that and I'll try something different next time. You surround yourself with good people. You take ownership of your things. You develop discipline to do. It's not motivation doesn't mean anything because that comes and goes very quickly. But if you can get disciplined and doing things when you don't really feel like it, but you know you need to do those things. So if you do those things, it's going to help. And one thing I would say is if you struggle with discipline, ask yourself this. When you can't be bothered to go for that run, or you can't be bothered to do the work, to write the essay, whatever it is you have to do, ask yourself, do you still want the outcome? Because if you still want the outcome, you have to do that, even if you don't feel like doing it. And that's sometimes what I say to myself now. If I'm really honest with you, a lot of the time I can't be bothered to do stuff. I just can't be bothered. But I force myself to do it. And you have to do things to feel like doing them. I would say 50% of the time I don't feel like doing stuff.
Do you ever procrastinate?
Yeah, all the time.
So how do you manage that?
So how I get over procrastination is if I feel like I'm procrastinating on one particular day, I'll say to myself, okay, let's just do a little bit today. We don't have to do a whole day. Let's just do 3 or 4 hours of this thing I can't be bothered to do. I know I need to do it. So we'll do a little bit today and then we'll come back to it another day. Because doing a little bit is a lot better than doing nothing. Because a little bit means you're still moving forward. But you don't want to...
Mindset.
Yeah, that's it. So, yeah.
And you were saying earlier you have to save yourself. So can you expand a little bit more on that and when you've had to do that?
Yeah, when you know, in terms of saving yourself, well, I suppose there's a couple of examples that I had to... I mean, for me, saving myself was picking myself up off the back of all those different failures. That was me saving myself. Believe it or not, saving Ash and I in the Indian Ocean was just me going through a process that I knew I had to do in order for us to get rescued. And saving yourself is also being honest with yourself. Sometimes people are not honest with themselves, right? And you don't want to hide. You don't want to hide things, and you've got to be honest. So if you yourself know if you're doing the work and you know if you're in a good place or a bad place, and sometimes saying, do you know what, and accepting, gee, I'm not in a very good place right now. I'm not living by the values that are important to me. I'm not putting any effort into anything. I have to change. There has to be, nothing changes if nothing changes. And so, yeah, for me, saving myself quite often starts with being able to identify something's not right. You know, because you don't want to be one of these people that's completely deluded and thinks everything's great, right? And it's really not. So you have to be able to identify that. That's a good starting point.
And you know, you've broken all these world records, but have you ever experienced imposter syndrome throughout any of
Yeah,
this?
I get it all the time.
Do you?
Yeah, it's crazy. So I mean, I still sometimes worry about, and I say to kids who I speak in front of, I say, listen, I am only a human being like you. I worry about stuff too. My mind goes on overdrive every day, but I control it and I manage it and I don't overthink things. And I somehow managed to get through. And, you know, I've got this speaking tour coming up, and I suspect there'll be times that I'm like, because you don't know who's in the audience. Now, I'm quite fortunate because not many people will have done the things I'm talking about. So I'm in a fairly good position to talk about these things. I think when it comes to imposter syndrome, if you're always honest with the things you've achieved and things you believe in and things that you talk about, you never have to worry about slipping up, right? Just tell the truth, be yourself, and everything will take care of itself. The second you start trying to be someone you're not, or you start kind of making things up or saying what you think people want to hear, I probably wouldn't do that. That's when your imposter syndrome will get even worse. So I don't know. But there you go.
So all throughout this story, though, I keep hearing that you've been pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone.
I'm trying.
So
Yeah.
talk to me a little bit about growth mindset and why you think that's important and perhaps how that's helped you,
Yeah.
but also how it will help our listeners and our viewers.
Yeah, good. For me, really a growth mindset is about always, I've never finished. I'm always trying to do more. And a growth mindset is being open to becoming better, right? You know this as a captain, you're always learning. You're never finished. You're always learning. So for me, I try to have that in the back of my mind that, I'm always learning and always be willing to learn. I'm always open. And having a growth mindset is being, for me, it's different for everyone, be open to criticism. If someone tells you something you don't like, you have a choice. You can take that on board or not, but just always be open, never shut things down, and just always be willing to just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and you can always do more. Always, always, always. So, yeah. But look, everyone is different. Not everyone will want to push themselves, but for me, I realized quite a few years ago, my character, I'm at my happiest when I'm pushing myself. That's what makes me happy. If you said to me, James, let's sit in front of the TV and just watch EastEnders all night, I wouldn't be happy. That wouldn't make me happy. That would be a waste of my time. And so everyone's brain works differently. Yeah.
So you've completed the ultimate triathlon. You have set a Guinness World Record for flying around the world in an autogyro.
Yeah.
You've also travelled across Greenland.
Oh my goodness, we haven't spoken about that. It was hard. That was really hard, actually. Yeah.
But what's next?
Yeah.
Is there anything left?
Yeah, there's always something. So, okay, I realised this when I was flying around the world, that I've circumnavigated the globe in the air. That's, by the way, is probably the most complicated out of all of it. I've been around the world on land, and I thought, you know what? And it occurred to me, there's no human being that's been around the world on air, sea and land. And I thought, how can I come this far and not try and sail around the world? So I have sailed across the Atlantic as well. So ideally at the end of this year, I'm hoping to leave to sail around the world. It'll be about 8 months. I'll be on my own, and I'm going to run an educational project from the boat. So on the boat, I have full internet actually. So I'm going to stream and send content out into schools, and it's going to cover like the geography of going around the world, and it's going to cover the sort of the science of the weather and all that kind of stuff. And I'll talk a lot with the kids around, you know, mindset and wellness, and how I try to stay positive, how I try to do the things that I'm doing. And what I will do is all the content that I'm putting out, it will align with the national curriculum. That will mean a school can follow and work on the project. And it feels right. And I think if you ask me why I'm doing it, A, I want to do it, right? I can't come this far and not do my first circumnavigation. And B, it feels right doing the engagement with the schools. If I just went around the world on my own for a jolly, I just don't think that would be right, and I feel it would be a wasted opportunity. I'm quite lucky. I'm in a position where I've done some things that perhaps not so many people will do, and I enjoy sharing these things with young people, and my whole mission is to try and get them to believe that they can pursue their own goals and dreams, whatever they may be. I mean, the world would be crazy if everyone was doing what I was doing. And I say that, you know, but, you know, try to treat people in a way you'd like to be treated. You know, don't be afraid to try new things. You know, don't be afraid to ask for help. There'll always be someone to help you. So real basic things, values that I've picked up and that have worked for me over the last 10 years, I share them with young people. And that has quite a lot of importance to me. I enjoy doing it, and I believe that has value. So yeah, that's why I do it. Yeah, and for some reason I'm quite good with kids, so I may as well just carry on doing it.
So you also
probably because I'm a kid myself, you know.
You're also actively involved with charities, and you're a scouting ambassador. So why is it important to you to be involved with charities?
Because I like to be able to do things that perhaps have a positive impact on other people. If I can go away and do something I want to do, it raises some money for a good cause and it raises their awareness, then why wouldn't I? It's a good thing to do. And I just something feels right. I really, really believe that if an individual, anyone is in a position where they can go away and do things or have things, I believe it's their duty to share those with other people. But that's not everyone thinks like that, but that's how I think. So I'm in this position to be able to go around the world and do these different things. It's quite hard to get myself into the position, but I can manage to do it. And then it just feels right. You know, just going around the world and not sharing the journey. And, you know, I talk to kids in schools who their kids never been to the beach. Seriously, never been to the beach. And so if I can, you know, bring some excitement to them and think, hey, by the way, you could be doing this one day, you know, because if someone else is doing it, what does it mean? It means you can do it too. And that just feels right for me, if I'm honest. Yeah. Some people probably think I'm a raving lunatic, but it's just what I do. And it all goes back to what we were saying earlier, it's having a purpose. So now I have a purpose to do the things I want to do that are important to me. I live by my own values. I have values that are important to me, and I don't detract from them. That's it. I don't worry about anything else.
So what's the key message that you would like anybody watching or listening to this to take away from your incredibly inspiring story?
Oh, thank you. Start now. Don't. And being quite direct, you can either start now or you can just continue to have excuses. And you don't want to have excuses. Start, have the courage to take the first step, find people that will help you achieve what you want to achieve. Go and talk to people who are doing the things that you want to do, and put a plan together and start working back. And every single day, start doing something that will move you towards your goal. Maybe it's some information, you start learning things, and then you start applying that, because learning stuff is useless if you don't apply it. You know, you've got to do both. And so that's what I would say. Don't be afraid. Don't worry about what anyone else thinks. Never worry about that. Just put yourself out there and go for it, because you have nothing to lose and everything to gain. And I'll tell you, as I've got a bit older, I'm not that old, but as I now am 40 years old, I've realised something. Time is very precious. When you're a young person, you don't value time. And you won't, because you're young, you have a lot of it. But it's only now I've got a little bit older that I value my time. So I'll just say, don't waste time, you know. The one thing I regret is I could have probably been doing all these things that I'm doing now 10 years ago. But I was a bit of a late starter in life. So, yeah.
So if you could change anything up to this point so far, would that be your main regret, that you could have started sooner?
Yeah.
What would you say to,
Yeah, do you know what?
to James of 20 years ago if he walked in through the door right now?
Believe you are far better than you think you are. You are far more capable than you think you are. That's what I'd be saying to me, and probably anyone who walked through the door who was young. I wanted to row the Atlantic for many years. The idea of rowing across the Atlantic came to me when I was quite young. And do you know what happened when I got out there? I got out there and I thought, all these years I wanted to do this, I could have done it. I would have been completely capable of doing it. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. Sure, I was hungry. Sure, I was tired. And there were times, sometimes it was a bit frightening at night when it was dark. You can't hear where the waves are coming. But I did it, and I was doing it. And I thought, I wanted to do this for the last 10 years. Shame I hadn't started it years ago. And so that's probably what I would say. Things are never as hard as you think.
It's incredibly inspirational hearing your story.
Thank you.
So if anybody wants to find out about what you're up to next or what you're up to now, where can they get the information?
Yeah, so just on my website, jamesketchell.net, the books are on there, and I actually have a full UK speaking tour starting in April. So where, to me, telling all the stories for sort of a whole evening with all the pictures and videos and stuff. So if that's of interest, again, it's all on my website. So yeah.
James, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for sharing with us your stories, and more importantly, what you've learned throughout your stories, which I'm sure will resonate with many of our viewers and listeners, and that they can all take something away from it.
Hope so.
Thank you very much for sharing your story with us here today on Inspirability.
You're absolutely welcome. Thank you for having me.